Okay, good evening, everybody. If there's any difficulty with audio, please let me know in the chat message room. And I guess we're going to get started. For those of you that have been with us before, and I do recognize a few names on the list, my name is Jen Cesar. Normally you're accustomed to hearing Michael Houston as the moderator. He will not be with us for this session and for the final session on January 31st. He's going to be spending quality time with his family on Thursday nights instead of being here with us. So tonight may be a little different for you and for us because this is our first time being our own moderator. So as I said, I'm Jen Cesar. I'm a grant partnership consultant for Texas Instruments, and I've been with TI since 2001 and have had the pleasure of working with schools and districts all across the country and have been in grants since 2011. With me tonight and who will be doing the bulk of the presentation so that I can monitor the chats and the questions is Doris Teague. Doris?
Hello. It's good to meet all of you. I have a past experience with Gear Up grants and other grants around the state. I'm currently working as a grants outreach consultant with Texas Instruments, and so I have experience at the state, national levels, and I'm very happy to be with you tonight and talk about how you can get some grants.
All right. So just some housekeeping for chats and questions. If you're new to the webinar sessions, we have two places where you can either ask questions or post a comment. We ask you to put questions in the Q&A box, and when we're not in desktop sharing mode, the Q&A panel is going to be on the right side of your screen. And when we are presenting in desktop sharing mode, the Q&A panel can be accessed via the floating toolbar at the top of the screen. For audio, if your audio becomes disconnected, follow these instructions to reconnect it. You're going to click the eject arrow at the far right of the floating toolbar, select audio, then audio broadcast, and click the play icon. If we're not in desktop sharing mode, you're going to go to communicate, audio broadcast, and click the play icon. Upcoming webinars and surveys, if this is your first webinar, then you kind of know how to get there. If not, education.ti.com, TI/TI webinars. On the 31st of January, we'll be having the last of this three-part series, so please join us for budgets in grant writing. At the end of the webinar, a brief survey will automatically appear in your web browser, and we do appreciate your feedback. Doris and I use that feedback to make improvements to our presentations. So please let us know what you think and what we can do to improve. Stay connected with TI through Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or YouTube at the links posted. Certificate of attendance. At the end of the session, you'll be able to generate a certificate of attendance with your name and information about the webinar. And I've already included that in the chat box, and I'll include it again at the end of the session. And to download tonight's PowerPoint, there's also a link there, which is also already in the chat. For post-webinar follow-up, if you have general questions or technical questions, you can contact 1-800-TI-CARES by phone, or you can call, or you can email ticares@ti.com. If you want to speak to a consultant about professional development or an upcoming purchase on TI technology, you can speak to your local ETC by sending an email at ti-educators@ti.com. Thank you for joining us. Okay, Doris.
Okay. Okay, Jen, thanks a lot. I'm going to switch over here to my screen. Okay. Well, okay, wouldn't you know this would be difficult to do? Okay.
You're going to go to share.
We have to switch this over. Do we have to switch over to me as the presenter over there?
Yes, I thought I did that. There we go. And if you'll share your screen.
Okay. Okay, folks. Thanks for sticking with us. We're doing this on our own, and we're doing the best we can. I think we're going to be fine. We started out doing this workshop in small groups, just people who were interested in having more funding for some classroom initiatives. And so we called it, You Should Write a Small Grant for That. And then we turned it into, You Should Just Write a Grant. And then now we're doing the grant workshops, it seems like, all over the place, because money is always an issue. And it never seems like, even if you have a district that has, you know, some large grants working, there's always some small things that you want to be funded for. So that's how we kind of got into doing this. And almost always the question is, we need more technology in our classrooms. And so TI is offering this for those of you who are interested in maybe in some more technology and need to write a small grant. We're going to help you locate some of those places that might be helpful. As I said, Jim and I have worked together on this. When you download the PowerPoint, you'll see our contact information, so feel free to reach out to us after this is over, or if you find a grant and you want a little technical assistance on it. Well, we don't write the grants, but we can walk you through it, so we'd be happy to do that. Tonight we are going to cover several things. Last week we did a lot of looking for grants in some locations that were out there, some search engines. And this week we're going to talk about writing a statement of need. Almost all grants are going to require you to do this. So tonight we're going to talk about how you can write a statement of need that identifies the problems or issues that you're facing or challenges that you have in your district or your classroom, describe them accurately, and then use some data sources to help support the need and what has worked in other places, perhaps, and then propose some solutions to address those needs and find some ways to get some funding to help with that. And then we'll do some closing questions at the end of this so that you can ask us questions that have come up, and feel free to ask them along the way too, because Jen is there and she's manning the chat room and the Q&A session. So feel free to ask along the way if I don't make it clear enough for you. So when we talk about a statement of need, there's always a request, whether it's a real simple grant or if it's a more complex grant. They're going to ask you why exactly you feel like you need this funding. So you'll need to have in mind before you get started, of course, and you will when you look for grants, what issue or problems you're facing. And they can be not even a big problem, but I can remember writing some grants where I even asked for money for field trips because we didn't have any field trip money. The district was willing to let us go, but there wasn't any travel money. So I wrote a couple of those and got those funded, and then I thought, well, this is pretty easy. I'll move on to something else. But so you just need to know what it is you really want to address in a grant. Who is affected, always keeping in mind that we're writing this for the benefit of students, and how those students are affected by whatever the need is or whatever the reason is you're writing it, and maybe what factors have come into play as you think about this. There's always budget cutbacks, so that's almost always a factor. Or maybe your district has had some loss of employment and you've lost tax money in the district and there's not as much money for education as there was before. Or maybe maybe there's a factor where you built a new school and you don't you want some more supplies or you want some more equipment, or there's lots of reasons why people ask for a grant. So get in your mind, what the problem is, who's affected, what are the factors, and really have in mind what could help. And I know that teachers are really good at generating these ideas, because they'll say, if we just had another teacher, if we just had some more equipment, if we just had, a calculator for every child instead of just a few that they have to share. So just keep in mind, what it is you really think would help in this situation. And then also a funder for grants likes to know what you're doing currently to address the problem and what still remains to be done. In fact, a lot of times people write a grant and they'll say, it's a good thing to say, we've done these things along the way, but we still need more money to accomplish X, Y, and Z. So don't feel bad about saying, we've started to address this problem. Don't feel bad about the fact that you've started it and you still need some more help on it, because that happens all the time. That's what that says to funders is you're making a good faith effort to solve this problem. And it also says you're managing the funds that you have, but you just need a few more. So when you start to write the needs assessment, you will probably want to look to several sources of data that can help you to support your statement of need. Almost always we think of, I need to tell them about what our test scores are, in our state or national exams. And so you can get that usually from your district assessment office, or you can get it online from your State Department of Ed. But there are other places you can look for that information as well. You can look at the Census Bureau, and you can look at the per capita spending in school districts and see where your district might measure up according to, what other districts of similar size are doing. You can use census data about employment, and maybe there's unemployment, a large amount of unemployment in your particular district, and you think, the students aren't going to have access to equipment or supplies and materials that they really need, that the school district is going to be responsible for providing those, and so where is that money going to come from? You can look at a lot of those kinds of things. The Census Bureau is super interesting in terms of the data that they collect. You can look at, if you're interested in finding out what has worked and what kind of models are out there for TI equipment and use and programs. TI has an extensive research library that you can go to. It's on their website. If you have trouble maneuvering that or looking for that, Jennifer and I can help you go there and point out some of the things that other places have done that have been successful, and you can include that in your grant. You can look at what's called the What Works Clearinghouse, which is a national clearinghouse for programs across the United States that have been funded, and the research has been gathered to support, literally, when it says what works, it's what has worked when they've tried various innovative techniques and strategies. And so it's a really good idea nowadays. There are many grants that will ask you to cite research that supports your hypothesis or your idea of what you're trying to do. And you can go to that What Works Clearinghouse and find a lot of those citations and that supportive data. So don't hesitate to use that. And literally you can put that in your browser and search for the What Works Clearinghouse. You can go to your State Department. There are usually several grants that are grant options from State Departments. It's usually federal money that's flow through to a State Department, and they'll send out a call or a notice about applications. So it's always a good idea to keep checking with them and seeing what is being funded. A lot of times the school district will apply for those, but it's a good idea if you're in a classroom for you to keep looking at those too, because, you know, sometimes those things go by and you miss deadlines, and you could also just be a good reminder to people in a district, you know, hey, these things are coming up for reading, or these things are coming up for help with algebra readiness. There are all sorts of things that are out there that are funded through your state departments. And then there's also national organizations like the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics and the National Science Foundation that offer a lot of grant availability. I will admit that many of them are pretty complicated grants. So if you're a first-time grant writer, it may be you may want to gather a group of people together and in your district and work on that. But a lot of the organizations will even offer a couple of $1,000s for some innovative ideas that can be done in classrooms, and some materials and some equipment. So don't hesitate to go to those kinds of places to support what you need and what you've read about in these locations that has worked.
Doris?
Okay. Jen?
On the State Department of Ed, would you also go to the assessment site to look at your district's data?
You could, yes, and you can see how it compares to others. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. The good thing about the State Department, Ed, is it's all public knowledge, and so you can see how other districts of similar size and demographics compare. It drills down into, you know, subpopulations. It drills down into the content areas, and it shows trends over time too. So those are all really good, you know, those are all really good sources for you to add to your needs assessment and actually your solution too.
And I'd like to talk just a little bit, if we can go back one slide, Doris.
Sure.
The TI Research Library, I will tell you it is a little bit challenging to locate something in the research library, but we have data on the handheld uses. We have data on using graphing calculators in Algebra 1. We have data on our wireless classroom system, the TI Inspire CX Navigator, and other data. But if you have difficulty finding anything in the TI Research Library on TI products and professional development, please contact me because I will happily find whatever it is you need. And if we don't have it in our research library, I will probably find it someplace else for you and give you several options.
So that's a great offer there. So take advantage of it. Thanks, Jen. That's a good addition. So one of the things that you want to think about when you're writing this statement of need is you think, okay, off the top of my head, you know, I know that we have students that come to us, you know, even maybe not on grade level or whatever the issue is, or maybe, you know, you think what we need to do is we need to expand or enhance our curriculum. So how do we do that? So this little mind map idea just works great for that, because when you write a statement of need, you're not just writing about, you are writing about the need, but you're also going to be able in there to explain some information about your district and about what you maybe already are doing, or maybe some of the solutions. So the statement of need covers a lot of territory. One of the things that you can look at is some of the resources, the organizational resources that you already have in your district. And you're probably thinking, well, you know, will these funders think, hey, they already have all this going, you know, do they need more help? And the answer is absolutely, positively, because those programs need to be sustained and a lot of times need to be expanded to serve more students. So organizational resources you could look at, we've just listed a few examples here. You can look at some things that are already in existence. Maybe you have a pretty good after-school program, or maybe you have a program, an after-school program, and it's good and you think we could expand it to more students. Okay, so that's already organized. It's a resource that's there. You could tap into that and say, you know, through our after-school program, we want to do this and this and such. We want to try these things. Maybe you have a robotics club, and maybe because those robotics clubs are kits are pretty expensive, you think if we had more money, we could expand that to more students because they have more students that are interested. But basically, you already have the structure. By having the robotics club, you could just think of that as a resource that's already there, but you want to expand upon it. Or maybe you want to, hire more, pay more people to work with it. Or maybe you want to bring in some mentors for those kiddos. And then speaking of mentors, maybe you have a good mentor program in your district, and maybe you think, this is working so well, maybe we need to expand it to other grade levels. Or maybe we have it for math, and maybe we need it for writing as well. So those are just some ideas of the structures that you might already have in place. But do you see that each of those that I talked about also had a way that you can express we have a need to do more, or we have a need to expand, or we have a need to purchase. So that goes into your statement of need. Another area you can look at is to look at the data and the research that support that need. What is do you have end of course testing? What is that looking like? And is that trend, is that spiraling down? And what could you do in advance to bring that up? You do have the data there. You have the research you need to show that is a need. You can also write a grant based on classroom observation. That's a legitimate use. That's a legitimate piece of data that teachers collect all day, every day. And that is as professional as it gets, is to make observations in a classroom about how students are struggling, or which ones are excelling, or what are making the differences. So don't discount that as a piece of data that you can use. And then you can also look at census data. You can also look at as I said earlier about census, you can look at economics in census. You can look at social changes. You can look at the way the community is changing, the amount spent on education. So those are some areas where you can use the data that you have readily available. And that would supply information about the need. When you look at, I'm going to jump over to community and outside resources. A lot of times when you write a statement of need, you can say, we feel like we have some resources that are working, but we think we need a few more. Maybe you want to put in something, maybe you want a service project at your school, and you think, well, we feel like this would help students learn responsibility. We feel like it would help them do problem solving. We feel like it would give them something maybe after school to do. So there are a variety of resources maybe you have in mind to do for a grant. A Master Gardener program is a group that their whole mission is to help with the community in terms of being good stewards of resources, being able to help even kids learn about growing things. So there's a good resource for you right there. Maybe you have a community where there are some engineers who have said, I'd be happy to come up and work with your robotics kids, or I'd be happy to come up and do a classroom presentation. Well, think about those when you write that statement of need and say, we need these kinds of things. We need this. How can we write a grant so that we can include these? And maybe, something else, there may be botanical gardens, and there may be, this comes under the heading of places you want to maybe take students on field trips. Again, as I said, I started out because I wanted to take students on these field trips, but there wasn't money. Maybe there are some people, then you think this is a resource that's right here in our community. How can we possibly, get funds so that we can access that? And then the last area that you would probably want to spend some time mind mapping is the data and the research that supports a solution that you have. Maybe you're thinking, okay, so what we need is we need more graphing calculators. Well, how can I, without just coming right out and saying, hey, we want to buy graphing calculators, how can I cite some research out there that supports that as a possible solution, along with some teacher, training and along with some support from the administrators? How can I help my students with these graphing calculators? And there are, as Jen said, in that TI research library, many examples that have shown vast improvement when students use them. So use graphing calculators. So there's some data to support it. You can look for, nowadays, one of the things that you can find a lot about is some impact reports on coding and how important that is for students to learn and to know, and how future jobs are, future workforce is asking for graduates who have experience with coding, and what kinds of careers are out there, and how would this help students. So you can find those kinds of research sightings for your solutions. And you can look at, there's a lot of data in, especially in the What Works Clearinghouse, about professional development, job-embedded professional development, specifically for the kinds of things that maybe are a need in your district, that maybe you have a lot of teachers that, maybe technology is important in your district, but maybe you have a lot of teachers who need more professional development in implementing that in classrooms. And so maybe you can find examples out there, I know you can, in the ways that districts have had coaching, whether they have brought in coaches to help, or they've done demonstration lessons, or they've had teams of teachers work together to develop skills that they can use in classrooms. So there's enough data out there and enough examples probably so that you can write a pretty strong statement of need and a pretty strong solution for that need. I think I said that all in one sentence. So Jen, if you want to clear that up, you sure can.
No, actually, I was going to say that in the Q&A, they're asking to actually look at some sample statements of need.
Okay. Well, isn't that handy? Because we are going to do that very thing. We're going to look at a few examples that we've pulled together, and certainly these are just, pretty generic, but we pulled together some. Initially, it should be very data-driven. Your needs assessment needs to be, it's usually not an exciting piece of information, but it is very laden with statistics usually. Here's an example. Okay, so here's an example. This is a needs assessment, a needs statement. Increased use of instructional technology in classrooms is a district goal. And a yearly technology survey indicates that only 30% of your teachers are integrating technology in their classroom curriculum. Okay, so that's a need. You say, it looks like not enough teachers are using this technology. So that's a need right there that you obviously there's some reason why teachers are not doing that, and usually it's time, and usually it's has a lot to do with the nature of whether they feel comfortable doing that or not. So you can think about that mind map that I just showed you and say, this is our need. What are some solutions? Well, would it be that they need, where could we get data about this? Could we do a survey in the classroom and ask teachers why, not you should be using it and you better use it? No. Let's go with why. What are the barriers? What is keeping you from using the technology? Or what would make you feel comfortable about using it? Or what are the things that you've tried that worked? And then how can we help you use this more? So would a grant fund something like that? It would. There would be professional development grants out there that you could probably access. And for, it could be large or small, but probably you could get several $1,000s if you've already started a technology initiative to get the professional development, the follow-up, and the coaching that goes along with what your teachers are asking for or needing.
Something Doris, I was just going to jump in on
okay.
you. Something to clarify for everybody. These sample statements of need, we also do this workshop face-to-face, usually in a day's workshop. And so what you'll notice at the top at this section is what's missing. So these are not complete statements of needs. So if you need a full one, we can certainly send you a full one. But I wanted you to be clear that what we're looking at here is this is the beginnings of a statement of need, but there are things missing from it based on that mind map that Doris talked about. So you would be telling your story here, and there would be additional things that will be necessary. You'll see it clear in the next one, how this first one is not very full. And it's missing a lot of information.
Yeah, it's pretty incomplete. So let's look at the second one here. This is about an elementary school, and the demographics are pretty diverse. The school is at a low-performing status. They offer 2 ESL programs at the primary and intermediate levels, so that's in the lower grades and in the 4th and 5th. The students are integrated into regular classrooms, and they're pulled out to work with ESL teachers during the day. It has primary and intermediate transitionally developmentally handicapped units that students work within the regular classroom and are served through pull-out programs. So what does it state there in that at all? Do you see anything that tells you about what this school needs? The answer is probably no. It describes the school, and it talks about what they're doing, but it doesn't say anything about, what their needs are. It would make you, if you read this, you'd wonder, do they need something do they need more teachers? Do they need more teachers to work in the regular classroom so they have smaller groups of students to work with? Is there any other data? Have they done anything along the way we don't know what the need is, so we don't know what they've done to support that need, do we? Or
what they want to do.
Yeah, or what they want to do. So why would they get funds until they say, this is a description of our school. This is what is happening. But they've left out what they need or what they feel like they need or what they've observed they need or what the data tells they need. And until they have that, then their needs assessment is just a statement, a description of the status quo at the moment, okay? So keep in mind when you're writing this, it's okay to describe the situation, but you also need to describe what it is you need. And here's another one. Here's one from a high school campus. A campus needs assessment examined the academic achievement in both math and literacy on a state proficiency test. Only 25% of the students passed the math portion, and they had a similar situation in a national exam. Based on these findings, the focus must be on math success. This is where we need the most help. In addition, the technological capacity within the school was measured, and in terms of technology, results show that teachers have both limited access to computers for use in their classrooms and inadequate training in the use of instructional strategies for all students that includes mathematics and technology. The school has purchased TI graphing calculators for several classrooms, but teachers are not using them because the students have low test scores. Hey, sometimes you see that. Sometimes a school will say, we're waiting for the kids to get better at math before we'll use the calculators, and you think, I think they get better if you use those calculators, but nevertheless, you're going to see some of these. If you ever read some grants, they'll be in there. So this one is a pretty good, though, statement of what their need is. It just isn't specific enough to say, we feel like we need, we have computers, but now they need the training in how to use the computers in an instructional manner, right? And they need probably some help. Their teachers probably need some help in using those graphing calculators to help those students to bring up those test scores. And they probably can find out there several examples of where other school districts of their same size have done exactly that thing. They've done a good job of stating the need. They've done a good job of stating what the issue is, but they haven't really come up with too much of a solution there or any data to support it. So if we've given you examples here, and you wanted a good needs example, a statement of needs, and if you want to reach out to us, we can send you some of those too from some of the other grants that we've read. But we wanted to show you that there's such a thing as, and I have to say this to teachers all the time, you have to lay it all out there. You have to tell them, this is what we're facing, this is what we've done, these are our needs, we think we have a good solution here. And don't be afraid to say, we've tried a lot of things and it hasn't worked. We want to try something else now. Because that's what funders want to know. They want to know if you have a passion for what you're doing and if you have an idea of how to solve a problem. So when you work on, I included a paintbrush here because you really need when you're looking for solutions to these problems, you need to, as I said, paint a clear picture of what your organization is going to do to address the issue. Give those specifics about the actions you plan to take and be real honest, be very transparent. This is what we need. This is what we've tried. And we're willing to try, we want to try something different that may have better results. Ask some staff members to provide some even testimonials or examples of information that they could bring to the solution to the problem. You look at other team members to give statistics, any research that they've read or they've possibly know about that's been conducted, even maybe in some of their university courses. So these are all ways to find out more about how to support the solution that you're proposing. So again, talking about the proposal and the solution, be sure that what you write in your needs assessment and your proposal fits what the grantor is going to fund, and also the guidelines for it. Don't just restate the guidelines. I'm interested in a literacy program. Say, I'm interested in a literacy program, and this is the reason why, and this is what I feel like the literacy program should be able to do. So don't just, kind of restate what they've already written in the grant proposal. Come forward with some new ideas, and think outside the box. Provide some creative solutions, some solutions that'll stay within the guidelines. By that I mean what is affordable, what the amount is that the grant is willing to fund, the timeline that's set forth in the grant. It'll also have, most grants will have guidelines that will say to you, it can't support these kinds of expenses, and it can't, you can't have a percentage higher than this where you have administrative costs. So you have to stay within the guidelines, but try to come up with some fairly creative solutions to your problem, because obviously school districts in good faith have done just about everything they can think of, and they're asking for, some funds to help them propose another new way to solve something. And then make your proposal original. Try not to just, rewrite the same one over and over again, because obviously each of the funders has kind of a target or some some areas that they definitely are looking for when they read your proposal. So kind of force yourself to rewrite some of those sections for each grant you write. Don't just white out one name and write in another one. And you're going to use your SMART goals. You all know what SMART goals are because in school districts you write those all the time for your mission and vision statements. And be sure that you include an evaluation component. You know, what are the goals? What are you going to evaluate? What are you going to look for? How are you going to know that it's successful? Is it within the timeline that's been given? Do you have enough personnel available to carry this out? And then how are you going to evaluate that? And when are you going to evaluate it? When you're going to collect the numbers and the data and the grades and even the anecdotal information about whether this is working. And last, I put this in red because it's really important. Write a compelling story about your need and about your solution. You know, if they see your passion shining through in that needs statement, they are going to be very likely to look again at your proposal. And sometimes, even if they don't fund your particular proposal, you can call them back or you can email them a lot of times that contact, and they will say, you know, this was not quite what we wanted, what we were wanting to fund, but we know another source for you. And maybe they will suggest another funding source because your story was so compelling and so important. So don't ever be discouraged. Always think, you know, there's another way possibly to get this done.
Doris, I'd like to add on to what you were saying. A lot of times people are hesitant about going into grant writing for the first time because they feel like they don't have experience. And the one thing I will tell you as educators and being in the field of education, you have this. This is not going to be something you can't do, because what you do on a regular basis is write lesson and unit plans. And realistically, a grant proposal is just a fancier form of a unit and lesson plan, because you've listed out what your objectives are and the goals that you're trying to achieve, and you're spelling out exactly how you intend to, what activities and things you intend to do to achieve those goals and objectives, and how you're going to measure and evaluate your success on it. And that is really the nuts and bolts of what you're doing with a grant proposal. The only difference between a grant proposal and your unit or lesson plans is that that compelling story. It's that ability when you have put it all together to make the funder feel urgent about your need and a strong desire to fund it. And that's the only difference. Absolutely. And that you would be surprised how many times we have to say to people, but you know, when I talked to you about what was going on in your district, you had such a great story. I wanted to hear more about it. And they said, oh, we'd be embarrassed, you know, to ask for money, or we'd be embarrassed to ask for more. And I said, absolutely not. This is something that will be better for kids. It will allow you to do what you know and you feel like is really going to work here. So please put it out there in your story and be very transparent and open about it. Okay? So Jen just led right into this. This is absolutely what teachers are great at, looking at measurable steps along the way, like who's the target audience, and what is the service or the program that you're hoping to implement or fund, and what's the timeline? You know, what are you going to do along the way? If it's a grant that only lasts a year, what are you going to do along the way to gather data about what's working or what you need to change? What should you have done by certain deadlines? And then you're also going to outline the means by which the objectives will be achieved. You know, what are those activities? What are those great activities, and what are those opportunities for students, for teachers, for families? What are you going to do along the way to help these objectives be achieved? And then very important is how you're going to assess or measure.
Is it going to be, even explain the tools that are going to be used along the way, and even who is going to do this assessment or this measuring. So those are things that, as Jen said, you're used to doing in classrooms, you're used to this in districts. So include that good skill that you have in writing a grant as well. Include those goals and objectives. So we have gone through needs assessment in a I've gone through a pretty quick manner. And the next time that we have one of our sessions, we'll do budget development, because in part 3, we will talk the entire time about the things that ought to be in a budget on a grant proposal and the way that you can actually make your budget kind of describe what it is you're trying to do, because the grant readers will know immediately when they look at your budget if you know what you're doing, because the money will be there in the right locations and the right amounts to carry out the plans that you've written in your proposal. So, Jen, I'm going to toss this over to you and see if we have any questions over there.
We do.
They can download this. Okay.
We had a question on samples of assessments that we could share, and I did put a question back out. If you could tell us what type of assessments you're looking for. Are you looking for methods? To the question, are you looking for assessments, meaning types of evaluations that you could do, or are you looking for types of data assessments that you could collect? If you could be more specific, that might help us to respond. One of the things, that's a good question. One of the things you'd be looking for would be if you are measuring something like, for example, students, benchmark tests along the way that students are taking. There you have the scores to show improvement or lack of improvement, or the objectives that students were low on. So you have that along the way. You can do surveys, pre and post. Surveys would be something you could do along the way for assessments. You could have an outside, agency or a group come in, and they could do assessments along the way with students. They could do interviews. The questioner asks, after receiving grants, you need to show growth in knowledge. So that's their area of assessment that they're looking at.
Absolutely. So then that tells me that what you need to do is to get, first of all, when you start a grant, you need to look at those cute kids. You need to be able to say, what was our beginning point and how much growth have we seen in this length of time? So does that help any? Is that a good, clear picture? If you're looking at, say, growth in math, have their grades improved? Have you been able to give them benchmark tests along the way that show there's been growth? Have you given informal assessments along the way that shows there's been growth? Is their attitude better? You can also do attitudinal changes in as an assessment as well. Okay?
All right. Perfect.
Hello from Alaska.
Oh,
hello.
Yes, we had to Kimberly. Congratulations on your grant. Awesome. We're so excited for you.
Yay.
To all our participants, we want to thank you for joining us this evening. I've put the links up again on the screen. Hopefully everybody can see that certificate of attendance page. And let me make that full SharePoint slideshow. I'm just going to leave that there. I did also put it again in the chat box. I'll enter it one more time in the chat box. There is a link in there for the certificate, which is that first bit.ly link. And then the other one is for the PowerPoint itself. If you can't get it for whatever reason through that link, or you need some additional information, for example, we had people asking for sample statements of need, shoot me an email at jcesar@ti.com, and I'll be happy to address your questions and get that information out to you. Also, one of the other lucky things that you're going to get as a participant of this webinar is I have everybody's contact information, and Doris and I put together a newsletter every quarter that has current grant opportunities, grant writing tips and suggestions, and so you'll receive that. We don't send spam, and I don't share your email address with anybody else, so you'll only get that information directly from us that we hope you'll find to be helpful to you. And if, of course, you decide you don't want to get it, all you got to do is send me an email saying, hey, take me off it. If there aren't any other additional questions, I'm going to check the question section again real quick before we clock out here. Where'd my Q&A go?
So you all have been real troopers to stay with us tonight. Thanks a lot. And let us hear back if you look for grants or you're looking for a certain one and you think we could help you find something along those lines, or if you write a grant and you receive a grant. We'd love to hear those success stories too.
All right, and I think that's pretty much it for this evening. So everybody have a great evening, and we hope to see you on the 31st. And if you're attending the TCUBE conference in Baltimore, we will be doing a session on Saturday, and we'd love to see you face-to-face. In that session, we're going to actually write a grant.
So come by and at least say hello. Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everybody.